Today we discuss Condemned House by Lucille Boehm.
The house. Was it haunted?
You know what? Coming up on October, this is a solid pick for October, and we didn't even mean to do it. I think it has some of those gothic vibes to it for sure.
Yeah, after I read this, I had texted you and said, oh, this really feels kind of like a mesh of psychological Zora Neale Hurston met with Poe in this kind of gothic vibe. And yeah, it goes in a lot of different directions. And I'm very interested on what your take on what you felt the house represented, because I felt like I went down the normal route, but I think it's a pretty good route to go.
That's hysterical. I don't have a ton written because I figured we'd just vibe with each other here, but I wrote down 4 questions. My first question is, what does the title mean, aka Condemned House? That was going to be the first one I launched to you. Okay, since you pitched me first, I wrote down a couple of quotes that I thought were interesting here because it compares the Condemned House to the tired women sagging in the subway jam, which I thought was brilliant. We had an iron girder held 2 of the walls apart from a dark alleyway that looked like a missing tooth in the long row. And an ugly black seam scarred the face of the house from the ground almost to the roof. So the writing, it maybe like when you talked about kind of like that Poe-like writing, it spends enough time on inanimate objects being imbued with characteristics of the atmosphere, of gloom, of emotion, of damage, like the scarred face, the toothless grin. It may, in the way the house, I think, was described as swallowing either her or the boy Clarence up at one point. It's interesting how, to me, the Condemned House became this. This might be too strong of a statement to hit you with as my first point, right? But I'm just going to go straight in. It kind of became the face, no pun intended, of being eaten up by one's worries. And then the woman's worries in this case was poverty.
Okay, I could see that. I went, I guess, a little deeper. And of course, always talking with my wife about these things. I go in a certain venue, either, religion or psychology. And I went a little bit more psychology this way, of that the house is a person. And the different aspects of the house kind of represent the mind, the psyche of a person.
Okay, so walk me through that. Like, what do you mean by the different aspects of the house?
So like you said, with like the exterior having a scar, that is like the mask or the face of the person. The bedroom is like the intimate knowledge of somebody, intimacy. The hallways are your connecting memories. The kitchen is the lifeblood, or is kind of like who you are. Like people always talk about like how the kitchen is one of, if not the most important room in the house. The living room is how you're living your life. So each of the rooms of the house, each of the pieces represent kind of a portion of your mind compartmentalized off. And even to your point of like the house itself is almost described as a person with the scars, the tooth, the boards, everything of it. To me, all of them seem to represent a different portion of a person's mind.
I love that. What do you think that the house, like she didn't even know if it was a scar, like if it actually was a crack in the house, or if it was a heavy dirt stain, right? Like it had that Poe, not sure what's reality versus what is just a figment of my imagination. Do you think in your interpretation of like this house being representative of a different part of a person, the fact that we're unsure of things, the fact that it's swallowing her up, do you feel that the point of view, and I'm getting in trouble already because the narration's already interesting, because the narrator, I mean, at first I thought it was second person, but I feel like what was the point of view? Like it was almost like third person, but they kept saying you, that made me think it was like second person at some point.
I was a little confused on that as well, of who is the narrator. Is this a passerby? Is this the owner of the home, foreigner over the home, a ghost? Is this a landlord? Is this someone maybe buying the house? So I'm unsure. I just felt like each section is clearly something distinct, right? Talking about the basement, or talking about the boards. Just there's a lot of interpretation left open to the reader. And I think that's done on purpose. There's a lot of unresolved feelings. And I think that hits home for a lot of us, especially myself, of like thinking back. Imagine the house in its heyday when it's pristine, and then it's decayed over time. And you think about those lost memories. You think about the collapse of yourself, the collapse of the house, the loss of your id or your ego. That's kind of the direction I went with it, of why some of this stuff is missing or why it's left so vague.
You know, we've talked a lot about various authors and how they've used the setting to represent the emotional turmoil that the character is going through. And I just think even if you step outside of like that very heady, like, you know, like when is it going too far? When is it not far enough? Like literature allows you the freedom to do that, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. But, you know, sometimes I make these comments. We've read a couple of Faulkner stories, and like whenever the house is decayed and you have the leaky or creaky floorboard, like some people are like, you're reading too far, that represents the decay of the South. And that's fine if that's the way you think. But it's like, what allowed those homes, those barns, to become that way, right? When we look at like the great change of how the economy worked in America with the abolishment of slavery, we have a Harlem Renaissance writer that's talking about a house that went from something that was pristine, to your point one day, to now being this shadow of a memory, a condemned house that even frightens. Again, the narrator / you throws me off in the story, but it frightens us, where I think, are we afraid of the house, or are we afraid of what the house had to go through to get to that condemned state? Like, what was it that was deprived? What depression or loss of money or economic instability happened for something to have been let go so poorly over time? And I think maybe it's the house, but also maybe it's like that, whatever caused that trauma to that house is probably causing trauma to the mind of this character, Will. The fog of poverty is kind of how I took this one.
And if you look at it from a mid-20th century, post-war, how, and I think this can speak to nowadays, again, I think that why this story is so good is it's kind of timeless, of you could embed it into any point in history and it's probably going to function well for what's going on in life. Is, from a certain point of view, perspective is everything, of, is this the representation of maybe not a person? Again, you can look at it any way you want. And I thought this is where I thought you were going to go, is this is a community. This house represents the fall of, American society, or the fall of the norm of what America as society has become or expected to be, that our traditions are being eroded away. They're being scarred. They're being changed. There's this fragility to the human and Americanized of this house.
I don't think I'm too far off from your assumption there, because, when you had those very subtle lines of the houses were useless, the houses were out of a job, right? Because they weren't housing people, they became useless, right? Like if you look at it from that perspective of, we should have jobs, we should have a purpose, we should be furthering society. If you're not doing that, you're a condemned house, right? And is that fair to describe that same thing as a person, right? Like there are people who are being deprived of jobs, that needed that job, that would be willing and probably be good workers for that job, that are having a condemned life. By equivalency, if I'm doing the same thing with you as saying it's a person, that they're deprived of those opportunities in some ways too. I think you could look at it that way.
We said at the beginning that there is this air of Gothic tone, but it doesn't, to me, it never felt like it ever went into the realm of supernatural. It never really clarifies that there is, ghosts. It's a very eerie feeling through the story, but nothing clear cut as moves into the realm of supernatural, I felt like. So what else could the house represent? There are probably many different answers, but I think that these are the two, quote, easiest to kind of dissect.
So it sounds like at least we agree too then that the collapsing of the house that she thought she saw when she grabbed Clarence and ran out of it, was all in her own mind. Like there was no actual collapsing. The boy said he didn't see anything, but we don't know. But like theoretically, this was all her own implosion, her own mental trauma or something was coming through in this moment.
100%. And I know personally, as a child, and I don't think that maybe the time, well, maybe the age could be a factor of coming home to my own home and the lights being out, nobody there, it's dark, you're alone, it feels empty, but then like your brain plays tricks on you and you see a light, or did you see a light? Was it a reflection? Did you hear something or not hear something? The wind? I think that can play a lot into it. We've talked about many times before that our own memories are not to be trusted.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Was it poverty? Was it a representation of the fall of American society? Let us know what you took the house to mean, and the viewer out there in the comments down below. And honestly, even if you don't know what to say, but you enjoyed the conversation, leaving us a house or a hammer for fixing up a house would help the ever-hungry YouTube algorithm know that you enjoyed today's conversation. Thank you for spending time with us today. My name has been Una. Peace.
Peace.